Thank you very much. I'm pleased to have been invited down here, and I have done demos and club meetings and symposiums literally all over the place. Frank mentioned Willard Baxter. Willard was a dear friend of mine, and he took over as the resident woodturner at John C. Campbell back in 1996. And he called me and he said, I've just taken over the job here, and you are going to be my first instructor. And I said, good, you're going to be my first assistant. And it went downhill from there. But when Willard took over, Frank will tell you, we met in the woodworking studio. And Willard always wanted to make the woodworking studio bigger so that we could offer wood turning and woodworking every week. And unfortunately, Willard developed a brain tumor and died. And I went to the director and said, you know, Willard always wanted to make this place bigger. And he didn't get to do that. So instead of making it bigger, we're going to build the Willard Baxter wood turning studio. He said, you can't do that. I said, watch me. And in 2.5 years, I went around asking for money and came up with $250,000 from people that have taken wood turning classes there. And we developed the Willard Baxter wood turning studio. And then more recently, we quit having the Southern States Wood Turning Symposium, and we had a few dollars left over from that. So I went to the director and said, you know, we should have a Willard Baxter scholarship fund. And they said, well, you need $25,000 for that. I said, well, we've got about 10, and a few of us put in a few more bucks, and we contacted a lady who had told me that if I ever wanted to do anything like that, she had taken classes with me, and she said, I'll be happy to help out with that. And she helped out, and now we have the Willard Baxter Scholarship Fund. So we're at about almost $30,000 now, and we're looking for 50, but if you have a few cents to spare, we'd be glad to have it. So, but I've been teaching at Campbell since 96. If you haven't been there, Frank will tell you, it's an incredible place. We call it summer camp for adults. And I mean, we offer everything from wood turning to storytelling to music and dance and cooking and weaving and all of those things. So it's a really nice place to go. Just my little ad for them. And I've got a few catalogs. I didn't bring many, but if you're interested, you can go to folkschool.org and find it. But I am here tonight to turn wood. And I do this for a living. I'm a production wood turner. And I told Russ this evening, for about 15 years, I paid my mortgage with wine stoppers. Starting out with Cocobolo, which has gone out of sight on price. But back then it was reasonable, and I've made over $250,000 wine stoppers. I do it under duress now, just like ballpoint pens. I do them when I have to. But for the most part, I do furniture parts, architectural turning, things like that. And it's always something different. I just did the heaviest, well, I shouldn't say it's the heaviest piece, but a very heavy piece. It was solid white oak. It was 18 inches high and 16 inches in diameter, all glued up, dry white oak, and I couldn't lift it. Fortunately, I have a hydraulic lift dolly, and I can pick it up and put it on the leg. But it's, you know, it's something different every day. So I enjoy doing it. I enjoy teaching. I've been to clubs and demonstrations literally all over the country. I think I'm missing about 4 states. I've demonstrated in Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, or Taiwan, Canada, Ireland, and England so far. So, but I know you mentioned that I talked you into buying a skew, didn't I? And everybody loves the skew, right? It's everybody's favorite tool, and I bet no one in here has ever gotten a catch with it. If you haven't used it. So I'm going to do a garden dibble with the skew only. And it's something that when I do a week-long class, we spend most of the first day on learning how to use the skew, because if you learn to use the skew, it makes a lot more sense with all the other tools. And it really is all about the bevel. And if you don't have the bevel supporting the cutting edge with the skew, then it's going to It's going to run, that's right. So this is a piece of alder. If I'm making these to sell, I make them generally out of hard maple or ash, sometimes sapele. And but this is a nice wood to demo with. Everything's tight here. So I'm using a mini spur drive center, and this is about as fast as we turn, isn't it? So, and I prefer the oval skew, and it's all wrapped up because I sharpened it the other day, and I always carry at least 2, sometimes 3, because I don't know if you've ever noticed, but if you drop them on the floor, they always land with the point down. And I don't understand that, but it happens. So everybody wants to put a death grip on the skew and then put their entire body weight on the tool rest. Don't do that. Hold it lightly. It only takes a couple of fingers and a little effort. And please, put it on the tool rest first and let it touch. Everybody wants to put that death grip on it, and then they put it up here and make it sound like that. Don't do that. Gently let it touch, and then use your body. Most people stand back here like this, and they're not touching the tool rest, and they're trying to control the tool. It doesn't happen like that. So let the back of the tool touch, lift the handle until you engage the bevel, and then finally the cutting edge. And for some reason, it's important to keep this long point away from the wood. It will bite you. And it's all about finesse. Everybody wants to see how much material they can remove. And it's not about how much, it's about how little. And then once you have the finesse down, it's all about fluid motion. The center third of the tool is the appropriate place to cut. That keeps the long point above the surface. And it's less likely to catch like that. So the piece is round now. Never ever move the tool rest with the machine running. If you think you see me do that, it's a figment of your imagination. So we're going to waste, about a 1/2 inch on each end. And I measure everything very carefully. With the skew, you have to have some place to go with it. If you're using a spindle gouge, the shape of the spindle gouge removes the material so that you can roll a bead. The skew doesn't do that. And if you do this by the book, these relief cuts on either side of the bead should be half the width of the bead that you're going to make. It's also very important that the skew be extremely sharp. It's the only tool that I hone. I also, where is it? There it is. Mark the center of my beads. That way they're more inclined to be symmetrical. And this is where everybody gets into trouble. This is probably the hardest cut to make. You want to use the heel, and you only want to use about a 1/16 of an inch of the heel. And there are 3 separate motions that have to happen simultaneously. You exaggerate it, you lift the handle and let the tool slide down until the bevel comes in contact, and then the cutting edge, and then at one time you've got to lift the handle, roll the tool, and slide the tool on the tool rest. If you lift the handle or roll the tool too quickly, then it catches and kicks back. And you know how I know that? I've had it happen. It's also about taking very little at a time. If you get in a hurry and try to take too much, it's going to bite you. If you're doing multiples, and I do lots of multiples, Last fall I did 192 table legs, and Russ asked me tonight what kind of duplicator I have, and I said, you're looking at him. I am the duplicator. And I use some story sticks to mark things, but for the most part, I measure and mark things and then cut them. And it can be anything from tiny little buttons to go on a piece of furniture to 10-foot columns. I'm a consultant for Jet and Powermatic. The 4224 lathe that we came out with several years ago. We started designing it back in, I don't know, 2007 or 8, and it got put on the back burner because of the economy. And then they called me and they said, we're ready to go into the prototype stage. Give me a list of what you want to have on it. I did, and they did everything I wanted. They called me back and said, get a plane ticket, we're going to Taiwan. And I got to visit all the factories and use the lathe and everything, and that was kind of fun. And I ended up with serial number 1, and mine is 10 feet long. It's not 10 feet long because I have to have a 10-foot long lathe, but there are people that want things that are that big, and I'm getting too old to do that stuff now. I did some work for the Martin Luther King house when they redid it a year or so ago, and the contractor said, do you mind if I tell other people that you're willing to do big stuff? I said, just don't tell a lot of people. And this guy called me and he said, I've got a project and I understand you can do 10-foot, 9-foot and 10-foot columns. I said, I can. I said, how many do you have? He said, well, they're 10 by 10 by 9 foot and I need 80 of them. I said, you need to call somebody else. I said, I work by myself and I don't have room in my shop for 80 of them to start with, so. And a long time ago, I did a whole bunch of work for the villages. They sent me 75 8 by 8 by 9-foot columns, and that was back before I had the long lathe, and I had to put 3 of the 3520Bs together. I'm actually measuring. This is a 1-inch calibration here. When I do these as a production item, they take me roughly 7 minutes a piece to do. And I tell people that want to learn how to use the skew, if you go home and make 10 of these, it loses its intimidation. And I'm using a mini spur drive center. Rudy Osalnik came up with it probably 40 years ago, and he gave me my first one and said, son, you're wasting too much time turning that machine on and off. He said, use one of these, you won't have to do that. Uh-oh, I didn't get a good cut on the end, but this is a garden dibble. And a garden dibble, it's also called a dibber and a dibbler. And you prepare the soil. We live in Georgia. You have to have a 30-pound sledgehammer to drive this into the red clay. But you prepare the soil, you push it into the appropriate depth, drop in a bulb, cover it up, and in a few months you'll have flowers. So if you make this, do you have holly here? Holly wood? If you make this out of holly, which is pure white, you can also use it to kill vampires. It's important to know that. So that's a garden dibble. And the thing about the skew is there's not a lot of sanding necessary. And to date, I haven't found anybody that really enjoys sanding. So this will save you a lot of time and effort. And it will teach you a lot about turning. So any questions about it? I use the oval skew, and Alan Lacer and I have an ongoing battle. His is a weapon. He tells everybody mine's for opening paint cans. But the oval skew, back in when I first started turning 50-something years ago, all the skews were rectangular in shape, and they were ground, and they had really sharp corners, and the sharp corners made little dings in the tool rest. And every time you tried to make a planing cut, it would go tick, 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 tick along there. This is the first one to come out with a rounded edge. And at estate sales and when somebody's getting out of turning, this is what I look for. The 1.25 inches. The wider it is, the greater the center third is, and it cuts better. Small ones, you can use big tools for small jobs. You can't use small tools for big jobs. So, all right, let's make a lamp. Is this the knockout bar? This isn't a standard knockout bar. There. I've glued up poplar. And I do a lot of things for the millwork people out of poplar because it's paint grade wood. If it's going to be stained, we'll use soft maple. I use hard maple, whatever anybody insists on. But if it's an economy job and they're going to paint it, then poplar is the thing to use. This is one of the big steb centers. We're going to turn it round, put a tenon on each end, drill it, and then go from there. Oh no, oh I didn't. I'm not used to a one-way, and I have a bad habit of just hitting the stop button. And one of the things on the Powermatics is when I'm teaching, I always tell everybody to turn it on and off with the potentiometer instead of the on-off switch, because people finish doing something small that's turning fast, then they put a bowl blank on and turn it on. It's not a good idea. So we're going to rough this out with an 1.25 inch roughing gouge. This is going to be a very traditional lamp. How long did it take you to get your lamps, Kathy? How long? Oh, I'm sure you're exaggerating. It wouldn't take that long. It did. It took 20-something years. And we got really nice brass lamps for Christmas, or for our wedding. And I said, yeah, I'll replace those one day. But they are cherry now, and they're much nicer. So I'm going to put a tenon on both ends because we're going to drill it from both ends. And for that, I'm going to use a Badan tool. Off. So that's how we're going to start. For the base of the lamp, we're going to do a poplar disc. And I've drilled a hole in it so it will accommodate the screw center. And don't ever do this. This is dangerous. So we're going to use a bowl gouge to true this up. The 3/8 is my go-to bowl gouge. I just got a brand new one. And typically on bowl blanks, I don't true them up this way to start with. I wait until after I flip them over, but we're going to do something different with this. Do the pencil. I'm going to true up the bottom. I have DVDs available if anybody's interested. You can see me afterwards. We're going to put a recess in the bottom for the wire so that you can have a knot on the inside for strain relief. A lot of times on floor lamps, because they're typically 50 plus inches tall and oftentimes the base is not large or heavy enough to accommodate that, we have to make allowances for a lamp weight that one of the lamp fixture places offers them in various diameters and various weights depending on what you're going to use them for. And we're going to put a recess down here for the chuck. What did I do with it? Well, I just had a caliper in my hand. What did I do with it? We'll fake it. Should be. Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, just shout them out. So here we've got the recess that's going to allow me to put it onto the chuck. So that we can turn the top of it. Because the shavings coming off here will beat up the back of my hand. And I used it to put the piece on the splinter because it was spinning and I get splinters. And when I do an artist at school program and in a full day, I will do 6 40-minute rotations with 5 minutes in between. And the most frequently asked question is, do you get splinters? Do you bleed a lot? So I do get splinters. So now we're going to shape this, and I'm just going to put a bit of an OG on it, and we'll give it a little shape. And I'm also going to drill for the wire to come through. If I'm doing lots of the same lamps, I'll do this while it's still square. So we're going to leave a little flat area or fillet, or flat. And to detail, I'm going to go with a spindle gouge. Blend that in. Then we're going to come back with the same detail gouge. And there's a book that I highly recommend for anybody that's either turning or throwing pottery. It's called Classic Forms. It's by a gentleman named Stuart Dyas, D-Y-A-S. And I've got it here, and I'll pass it around if you want to take a look at it. But all it is shapes. Basically line drawings of everything from lamp bases to urns to column bases, candlesticks, you name it. I would like to have it back. It's been around the world twice. And I'm not sanding or finishing anything here, but I would normally sand it now. It's available on Amazon. It's about $50. I've had people in rotations like this that have ordered it while I'm talking about it. I see one little line here that I'm going to get rid of. The better you cut, the less you have to sand. And we were doing a symposium in New York. Oh wait, one more thing to do to it. I always forget this part. That 3/8 inch hole that I drilled. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Frank. That 3/8 inch hole will not work with a lamp rod, which requires a 7/16 inch hole. And my drill chuck, took it out earlier. Frank, I did bring a number 3 to number 2 Morse taper adapter. So the typical lamp rod requires a 7/16 inch hole. So that's what we're going to drill all the way through the piece. And if you don't have it through here, it doesn't work. I just like to make sure it's lined up before I initiate the drilling. And you don't want to start off with a long drill bit. It's going to wander on you. So we're going to start off with one that's just a standard twist drill. And I seldom drill over about 400 RPMs. And depending on what the wood is, you should clear the helix of the drill bit frequently. Otherwise, it will heat up and wander. If I'm doing floor lamps, rather than trying to drill them, I will take the two pieces and put it on the router table and route out a cavity in both pieces and then glue it together. And all I'm looking to do is go at least halfway through. Makes a great sound, doesn't it? Same thing again. And I try not to extend the quill the whole length. Went right through. Wait a minute. I need to make a recess in there for the tenon. And we may adjust the tenon size. I think we probably will. Back with the Bedan tool. So that's where that will fit into it. And that should be, yeah, needs to be just a little bit deeper, I think. So I have made a drill chuck, or I'm sorry, not a drill chuck, a drive center. It's one of the old Delta drive centers that the center point comes out, and I had somebody machine me a little stub to go in there that's 7/16 that will fit into that hole. And that self-centers. Never do that. And then for the live center, we're going to use a cone center. Hundreds. So, and I hate to say this, but I hate doing ugly things. And every once in a while, people send me stuff that is just not pretty. And I do it under duress, like the other things that I do under duress. But it's, it's whatever anybody wants. If they're happy with it, I'm happy with it. But this is one that, this is exactly like I made for our house, only out of cherry. You can see it's just a little out of kilter. This is one of the things I'll be doing at the AAW in Louisville. I'm doing 4 rotations, a panel discussion, and one of the critiques. So I'm going to start off by making that tenon fit the recess that I put in here. That's with the caliper. There they are. I'm also going to undercut the bottom so that when it fits to the base, the perimeter will be tight. And that is 4 inches, so we're going to make this about, 3 1/4. And this particular one I'm just doing by the seat of my pants, but normally I would have a set of plans to go by. want that to be roughly a 1/2 inch. If I have the opportunity to say anything about measurements, because this is 3/8, I use 3/8 and 3/4, and you don't have to measure things. So. And I'm going to come up, I don't know, I think about right there. What do you think? Think that's far enough? Okay. Works for me. That going, and then we'll come up here and pencil. Keep losing my pencil. We're going to do that. And that one doesn't have any point on it. That, and then think that's right. Hey, it's more fun to do it by the eye. And I don't know if you have any place similar in Sarasota or possibly Tampa, but in Atlanta we have a place called Lamp Arts, and Lamp Arts has all the parts. They have retro parts for any type of lamp fixture you want to do, or lighting fixture. And I generally leave that up to somebody else, but there are times when I have to do things myself. So we're going to make the cut here. I'm going to come back a little farther. I think you missed that by about 1/4 of an inch. And then we're going to come down, think about that far. And we're going to put a little bead right here. And again, I measure very carefully. And if you're doing multiples of anything, it's important that as you start doing the additional ones, that you start doing everything in the same sequence. If you don't, they won't look the same. This is a 3/4 inch continental gouge. Some people refer to it as a German profile. And I like it for areas where you're doing a sort of a deep cove and it's too small to get in there with a roughing gouge, but it's too long a run to do with a spindle gouge. It's got a fingernail grind on it. It'll leave marks. And when I'm doing this long cove like this, I don't want the smallest diameter to be right in the center. I don't want it to be 1/3 and 2/3 roughly. Just looks better. It didn't land on the point. Amazing. Come back. We're going to cut this back just a little bit. Did a class at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship several years ago, and 2 of the students in the class stayed for the following week, which was with Kimberly Winkle. And Kimberly, I refer to as the mistress of milk paint. She's a spokesperson for old-fashioned milk paint. And the 2 students that stayed with her took the furniture parts that we did in our class and made added color in her class, in addition to the things that they did in her class. Somebody I had recommended to Russ. Might be worth having. And of course, you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get the hardware to wire the light if you don't have a place like Lamp Arts. It's hard to get a clean cut on that end grain there. But a little 180 grit sandpaper would take care of that. It's got dust on it. I have 29 years of dust collected in my shop. Uh-oh, I missed it by just a hair. Thought I measured it. And it's all going to be held together with the hardware, so that's not really an issue. Now I made it too long, I bet. Oh, come on. Get a bigger hammer. Hey, you can always take more off. Tell people that all the time. It's better to make it big and turn it down. And I think I do have to take and make this a little bit deeper, but we can do that. And I cut it down 3 times and it's still too small. Okay, yeah, that's got to have that recess just a tiny bit deeper. Look, a real knockout bar. I guess I could measure this and see how deep it is. It's more fun to guess at it. It's more fun to guess at it. Missed it by a 16th. That better fit. There you go. So are there any questions? You know there's going to be a test. They didn't tell you about the test? The doing something like this and doing multiples of them is a really good exercise. The other thing that when I do classes, I typically make people draw things that they're going to make, and trying to get somebody to create a drawing of something they want to make is a challenge, and then trying to get them to take that drawing and convert it into something three-dimensional is an even bigger challenge. So. Now, those of you who are going to do pepper mills tomorrow, before you come to do a pepper mill tomorrow, I want to see a drawing of the pepper mill that you want to make. Is that asking too much? That's, hey. And so, there are no questions? Does anybody know how long wood turning's been around? When I go to the schools, and I do anything from, first graders up to high schoolers, and my first question is, can anybody tell me what this machine is? And I carry a Jet 1221 MIDI lathe, and their favorite answer, it's a wood turner. I said, no, I'm the wood turner. This is the machine we turn wood on. And I explained to them, and it's a wood lathe. And it's, first of all, the simplest machine there is. I mean, all it does is spins the wood. It's the safest machine because you're holding the cutting edge. Every other machine that we use in woodworking, you push the wood into the cutting edge. And if you make a mistake, it could be a disaster. And then I tell them probably the most interesting thing about wood turning is it's about the oldest machine there is for shaping wood mechanically. And I ask them if they can guess how old it is. And of course, being little kids, they start at 50 years. And I said, well, no, I've been doing it longer than that. And, when you hit somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 years, the oldest item, I believe it's either in a museum in London or at the Wood Turning Center, but was carbon dated to 740 BC. And I take a bow and show them on a real lathe how a bow was used and how you only cut on the pull stroke, and then you have to rewind it and cut again. And I go through the bow lathe, the spring pole lathe, which is no fun either. I've used one of those. The treadle lathe, which is 100% more efficient because as long as you're pumping, it's going in the same direction. And then water power, until I went to England and visited with Crown Sorby and Henry Taylor, I had no idea that at one time there were 160 plus water wheels on the Chef and the Don River where they converge, and that ran everything. And I went into shops that had the central shaft still, and OSHA would not approve of that. With the belts coming down from the ceiling, they'd frown upon that. But it's awfully nice to be able to push a button and turn it on and have it come up to 3,000 RPMs. So, I tell people this is the most fun you can have with a piece of wood. And I've done probably more different things than most anybody because I'm really the only full-service wood turner in the Atlanta area. And, I can do little tiny things or I can do 10-foot columns. So, yes, sir. With Minwax Wipe-On Poly, that's one of my favorite finishes. And I mean, it works beautifully well. It's durable. I use it on a lot of things. If I'm doing food-related items like my honey dippers, baby rattles, and rolling pins and things like that, I either use the Steve Cook tongue oil, orange oil combination, or mineral oil and beeswax. So, you know, and there's so many finishes out there, and everybody has their favorite. There's nothing that's perfect for everything, but you know, those two things that I use work very well.